So to start with, where from the contract came? And we know that we, as I just said, we have a law. But if we don't have the law, so how the mankind started with the contract? So you see in the global perspective, with respect to various international locations, like what Romans did, how the Muslim law talks about, what the Hindu ancient law says, and how in India it got developed. So we'll see that now. So generally, in general, there is one thing common. Whenever there was a law and whenever there was not, there was one thing common. That was the principles on which the contracts run. So even after we follow in India, UK, US, we follow common law, which is a law of precedence, which is based on the case law. There is a statute, acts are made, but the law is primarily governed with the cases. We take a precedent that this happened in this case and we follow that. So these all common law principles, on what structure it is based, we need to see, because that structure is same when there was no contract law. The first principle is equity. Equity means everything has to be shared equally among all. And at the same time, whosoever is not equal, there must be an equal protection of law. Even our Indian Constitution says that in Article 14, that there must be equality and there must be an equal protection of law. So this equity speaks about the uniform distribution among all the levels in the society. Then the second form, because whenever you draft a contract, if you go down, if you see the law, if you govern it, you will see these principles in the contract. That is why it is important to know. The next thing is the morality. No need to explain about morality, you know about it. Then natural law. Some of the contracts, before there was a contract act, they were governed with the natural law, the law by the God. Okay, if you do this thing wrong, God will see. So that was the aspect before there was any act made. So it is often really interrelated with the religious laws. Now, based on these principles, some of them, when we will discuss about the common law principles, some of them will be reflected in common law principles also. So these were the three bases before there was no contract act there. So if you go back in the ancient times, Romans, they started some standard form of contract. Although there is no written document about it, but they were being practiced in that society, in the ancient Roman time. The one was ipse verbum. It was the premise, the assumption that every contract is as per the will of law. It is governed by will of God, governed by the God. So with that will, it has a touch of morality and natural justice in it. So they believe that if you do some contract, if you do some deal, and if you're not fair, then God is going to govern. So there the governing authority is not your statute, not your state, it's God. Afterwards, they also say that the punishment, again, can be of two types. One is the punishment in front of the society. Another one is the divine punishment. Leave the person on his own. He did wrong, leave it. God will see. So that was one sort of contracting there. Then there another was sponsio. Sponsio means the parties who are going to sign a contract or a deal, they have to take oath in front of gods. That was considered as a sponsio, which is like an oath. The third form of contracting was nexum. Nexum was, like in some of the rural villages also today in India, we follow that any agreement has to be made in front of 5 persons. Village panchayats in India, you might have seen that. So that has to be there, and those 5 persons will be considered as a witness, and then the agreement will be recorded or officialized. And the last one was a personal, that is dotis dictio, which was basically the dowry in the marriage ceremony of a person. So these 4 sort of contracts were seen in the ancient Roman Empire. Now what happened when the other areas came into picture, that is the Muslim law. In Muslim law, the contract is again considered between the parties, but the governing authority was considered the God, which is Allah. The source was Holy Book of Quran and other subsequent source of law, like Hadith and all. So they take a precedence. The way we take a precedent in our legal interpretation, we'll see when we'll see the contract. So this was the same, and it was valid for properties, marriages, as well as inheritance laws. So that was the way it was governed in the Muslim society. Coming to the India, we know we have traditional source of law, which although today is being replaced with the with the modern Hindu law, but the old one is the basis somewhere to govern the new Hindu law. Like Marriage Act, the way is the same. Okay, so here the ancient sources were Manusmritis, Shrutis, Atharvaveda, and Kautilya, which is Arthashastra. So this all governed the initial laws. Before there was no written contract in the society. Now the formation of the Act. When British ruled India in 1726, there was a charter which was brought by King George I. And in that charter, the basic structure of Indian Contract Act first time came into picture. What he did, he implemented some contractual practices between the British people and the local persons who are having influence over the society, like maybe zamindars who has the land, or the big commercial guys. So they tried to make those agreements, and they implemented in 3 presidencies, which is Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. Now, when this became a success, and they tried to govern the business relationship between the parties, in year 1773, the Regulating Act, it made it more profound. It made it more enforceable, and it introduced some more terms and conditions related to contracting, related to guarantees, warranties, and lot many things in that. So this formation, this structure worked till 1862, and in 1862, the Bill of Indian Contracts Act 1872 was brought. It took 10 years in streamlining this Contract Act, and this act is so beautifully made that even after formation of Indian Constitution in 1950, this act was taken as it is. There is a clause, Article 13 in Indian Constitution, which says that any law which is not in coherence with this Constitution has to go. But this act still prevailed because it did not violate any conditions or requirements or rights of a democracy like India. So that is being governed by, like all Indian companies, they are governed with this. And the similar way, this was the birth of Indian Contracts Act. If you see in Britain, there's no written law, there's no written statute. But if you see their Contract Act and the guidelines, they are more or the less same as of this, because our law is governed with those ideas of common law principles, which was there in the British law. So this is the background of it. You have seen that how the origin of this started in the society, in the Roman society, in Muslim society, in Middle East, in India, and how in India it governed to become an act. So this act will take up now onwards. Till now, if you have any questions, you are very welcome to ask. Or shall I proceed? Okay. Great.
This enactment of Indian Contract Act, the 1872, which came, this was actually done by the Britishers or the Indians?
Britishers, because that time India was not free.
Yeah.
So they did so. They actually, the idea of contracting, they brought in 1726 only. They tried to streamline it, and because they were observing it. So this was a challenge because it took 10 years to get that act finalized itself.
Till 1950, all the acts were enacted by the British.
Yes. Okay. So this is all about history. I don't know whether some of you like history or not, but that was the basis. You should know how the contracting thing came, and when there was no statute, written law, how it was governed. So it was governed that way.
Okay. Whether it is relevant today or not, okay. So, evolved into some modern now contract act, but those Romans and all, it doesn't have relevance right now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. So now, in Indian Contracts Act, whenever you see any terms of your contract, the term may not be the same what is written in the act, but the idea is same. Like if you see your contract, there's no word anywhere written like promise. There's no promise. It's obligation, liability, right, duty. There's nothing about promise. But because the act is made in 1872, so that terminology is still there. But the idea is same, what is related to us. So if you see the simple definitions, which you will relate with our contract later, is the proposal. Proposal is like an offer, which we said today. So it is mentioned in section 2A, which says a person or party signifying other party, person or party, to express its willingness for doing a job or not doing a job also. You always may not have a contract to do something. You can also have a contract not to do something. I will not go this way. I will not do this. This is also sometimes mentioned in the contract, like exclusions and like what you should refrain from doing. So this is that. And the purpose of this proposal or offer in any contract, before you make the contract, is the purpose is to get assent from the promise to whom you have assigned. He should accept it. If he does not accept it, the offer is immaterial. So acceptance is important. So the first thing is proposal. Then the next thing in section 2B is promise. Promise says when the promise is made, as specified in the way in 2A, then it is assented by the other party or the receiver to whom it is addressed. When he assents it, when he accepts it, it becomes a promise.
It's like a currency. Right. this means right promise.
Exactly. The same way is written on it, so it's very well highlighted on the note. What is note? It's a note only. The value it comes because it writes by the RBI governor or whomsoever is there. At that time, he writes over the respective financing authority that I hereby confirm to pay you this. So it's a note. It's a promise. Okay. So now the promisor, as we seen, the promisor is one who makes proposal, he promises and receives the acceptance from the promisee. Now, what is consideration? When we speak about consideration in normal sense, it is something else. But when we see about law of contract, it is something else. Consideration is what? If a promisor makes a promise to promisee and a promisee accepts it, promisor does his duties. So what in return he will get? Consideration. Consideration can be money or can be service, any benefit, anything. It is outcome of the service, what promisor is going to do in the contract. So keep that term in your mind, it is very important. Is a consideration, what you get in giving the service. Now agreement. Here I want to ask a question. When I say agreement, the definition is in front of you. It says every promise or set of promises forming consideration for each other. So you can very well see it now because you know what is consideration, you know what is promise. So it's every promise or set of promise. There can be multiple promises combined forming consideration for each other, which if you do, you will get a consideration. So this is agreement. Is this contract? Why I have written agreement? Why not contract here? Is this the same thing which I want to speak today? Is it complete? Is there anything missing? There's a promise, there are promises, there's a consideration. So the deal is complete. What is missing here?
If it is not adhered, if the promise is not done, then what need to do?
But that is mentioned. It is believing that promise is there. Okay, that is the details. But what is missing in this statement? Can I say it's a contract? Proposal is there. When there is a promise, there is a proposal.
Some legal binding.
Exactly. Enforceability. I can make agreement with you tomorrow. I'll sell the Taj Mahal. You give me 10 millions. We can make it. We can write it. We can get it done. But is it a contract? No. The legal enforceability is missing. So there must be a legal enforceability for making an agreement to the contract. You can make any agreement, but it has to stand in court of law. If it does not stand, it's not an agreement. It's an agreement, but not a contract. It becomes a void agreement that we'll discuss in subsequent slides. So this is so. So now the contract, which is defined in section 2H of the Indian Contracts Act, is an agreement enforceable by law. So this you always keep in mind for the future, that it is not only agreement. The difference between agreement and contract, that agreement can have promisor, promisee, consideration, everything. But if it misses the legal enforceability, then it is no more a contract. So there's a jurist called Pollock. He has very clearly said in a single phrase that a contract is a legally binding agreement, as you say. A promise or set of promise which the law will enforce. So that is a refined definition of contract. So now we see the communication. Now when we see that who's a promiser, there's a promisee, there's a promise, there's a consideration, there's a legal enforceability. All 5 things you have seen now. So that is in your mind for the context onwards. Now, what is communication? How it is important? Any communication, either from promisor or promisee, it gets complete only when it comes to the knowledge of the person who has received it. Even some of you are from communication engineering, like electrical communication. You also know there's a sending end, there's a receiving end, there's a medium. And the message is, when it is received or decoded, then you can understand that the message is received. Not even decoded, when it is received. So same way, any communication as per law is also complete when it comes to the knowledge of the receiver. Please mind it, it's only knowledge, not the interpretation. I'm a receiver, I received a message, I did not interpret it, I did not decode it. It doesn't mean that I have not received it. The same way it is related to your day-to-day communication. When you send an email to the customer and it is your read receipt shows that he has received it, it is considered that he has received it. He cannot say that I have received it, but I have not gone through. Not acceptable. As per law, any communication which you got the receipt of acknowledgement is considered delivered, and it is the responsibility of the receiver that he should work on that. The communication of an acceptance is complete. Now the acceptance, he received it, now he has to accept. So how? Like he received it, okay, in his mind he accepted it. Will it be considered accepted? No. the person who's communicating, he should give an acknowledgement of the acceptance or any objection or any comment. So what it says that the communication of an acceptance is complete. Now there are two ways, against the proposer and against the acceptor. There is two perspectives. So for the proposer, the one who's sending, he will consider that his communication is accepted when it is put in the course of transmission to him back, so as to be out of the power of the acceptor. Out of the power of acceptor means once he confirmed back to you, it's out of his power. Then he cannot revoke it until he follows a certain legal procedure. So when it is sent back to you, not even received, from your perspective, when he has confirmed and transmitted to you, against you, it is from his side, like he will take a legal recourse that I have sent it. So this is his stand against you legally when he transmits and when it is out of his power. Now against the acceptor, he can say, but when you will say that you have received, when it comes to the knowledge of the proposer. So there are two perspectives in law. It's a bit different from what you see in the context. It's because of the law. Because perspective is important. If a certain party says in court of law that I have delivered it. So when you deliver against whom? As per him, against the proposer, means supporting the promisee. He had made it in the transmission. So understood that he has done it. But when it comes to the perspective of acceptor, until he has not got the knowledge, he cannot say that I have accepted it or I have received the communication of acceptance. Now we'll see an example. A proposes by letter. Any of you can respond on it. A proposes by letter to sell a house to be at a certain price. Okay. The communication of the proposal is complete. When? So it's through a letter. A is saying that I will sell a house to be at a certain price. Is a proposal. So when the communication of the proposal is complete. Any question? Any reply from Retro team?
When B is agreed for all legal.
Communication of proposal. I'm saying, I'm not saying communication of acceptance.
So when he sends the letter to
No, he signed.
We
He
acknowledge receipt or something like that.
receives the letter. Before that, no communication is complete. Similarly, B accepts A's proposal by a letter sent by the post. Now there are again two perspectives. When it will be complete? The communication of the acceptance. What you were saying that time. It was communication of will. Now it's a communication of acceptance. So B sent it back through a letter that I am accepting to your proposal. So when he says this, the communication of acceptance will be complete when, as against A, who has posted the letter. So it will be considered completed as against A when the letter is posted. When he confirmed, he posts the letter against A, his work is done because he is not supposed to do anything later. But for B, when the letter is received by A, then it will be considered as a accepted. So it's only the matter of acceptance or communication, but subject to communication. Acknowledgement is important. Without acknowledgement, you receive it, and you bear the legal responsibility. But you do not send the acknowledgement, it will be implied in this way, as per this law of contracts. Now, next topic is the type of contracts.
Just there. So in case we send a mail to a client, we keep him in notice. We give him in notice of some work. Okay, but he doesn't respond.
Okay.
Or he tries to ignore, or he doesn't. He keeps calm.
Okay.
He doesn't want to vouch for it.
Okay.
And then we go ahead.
Okay.
Some small work of it done.
Okay.
Then tomorrow, so he is in the knowledge of the work, but he didn't stop us for whatever reason.
Okay.
He allowed us to work.
Okay.
Then how it will be considered?
That's a good question. Now there are two scenarios with this. I will tell you one as per the general rule of contracts and then one as per the EDC. Both is not same. So in a general contract, when they have a power to approve, they have a power to hold you that I will accept this, then you will proceed. Then in that case, when you send any proposal, suppose it's a design and you submit it to them. Now there is always a clause of deemed acceptance. They cannot deliberately keep it for more than a timeline of particular days. In general, it is 14 days for design documents, especially to yourself. So for design documents, you submit it and it is implied, no need to explicitly mention in the letter that within 14 days it will be deemed approved. It is implied in the contract. So we will see the implied terms also as it is written. So when you send so, they have to revert for with approval or any comment within next 40 days. If it is approved, it's fine. If it has comments, then it will go to another cycle. That is timeline is again defined. That 7 days you again submit, they will do. And if they do not, it will be considered as deemed acceptance. They cannot say that I have not approved it. It is considered approved. Now when the EPC, it is the cycle is same. The thing is same, but the responsibility in EPC, like the contract of us, if they say that these are my comments, it is stands disapproved, you can still go, like you can complete the cycle. But at any point where you feel that they are doing it unreasonably, they are doing it deliberately, you have a right to say that I'm proceeding being an EPC contractor, citing certain clauses that are there in the presentation. I'll share with you those clauses. As a responsible EPC contractor, I'm proceeding with the things on the consequence that anything which is related to it, if it comes as a rework, default, anything, it is at my risk. So you can do so. But in that case, if you did give that statement, you should own the responsibility. So if anything goes, because sometimes it's not always that they will give fake comments. So you should see that. What is the reasonability of the comment? In law and contracts, everywhere there is one word which is always governing all the relationship. That is reasonableness. The word reasonableness is law has a huge scope. Anything, if you negotiate with any terms of the contract with the customer, if you think that they are not coming to the solution, you are not coming to the amicable agreement, just try to insert the word reasonability at various places and you will form that agreement. Because they may see what if, you will see what if. There are various what ifs. So to arrest all that, you can say reasonably. Reasonably gives you a scope, like suppose notify within 7 days, reasonably. You can always come back as per the law that reasonably it was not possible. Minimize the cost, reasonably. Reasonably it is not possible, right? Because when reasonably goes, the court of law sees that in a different perspective. He sees the actual scenario. The bindingness of that clause goes reduced or liberalized when you add the word reasonable. So coming to the types of contracts, the first one, which I was saying, the legally enforceable agreement is a valid agreement. If any agreement which is legally unenforceable, it is a valid agreement. This is the first type of agreement, like the contract we are working. So for being it to be valid, there must be certain things in the contract. Because we have seen there must be a promisor, promising, consideration, but that all was not holding good until we say about the legal enforceability. Now this legal enforceability, can you tell me with your ideas, any open idea, anything, what is that legal enforceability? If I say that this contract is legally enforceable, so this agreement is a contract now, what it should have and what it should not. How you make it legally enforceable? I gave you one example, Taj Mahal, this and that. So related to that, can you suggest me some words that yes, this word or maybe some word which are absent from the contract will make it legally enforceable? Any suggestions?
Some written document.
Written document.
Actually signed.
Okay. Well, it is an important point, but there are some oral contracts also. So this is only one of the things. That is good. What else when you say it's a valid contract?
Actually, like whenever both the parties agrees with the law, like law, definitely there should be a law, we should enforce it, and it should be endorsed by a third party who is a part of that law.
Okay, but that is again not a necessary condition because there are certain agreements which we consider is valid, but when it is interpreted legally, it becomes voidable. So that is also possible that an agreement can be living in a moribund state where you feel that I made because every agreement we cannot go to like a notary that you authorize it. Our agreement, lawyers are there to see the enforceability. So this is one point, but it is not something like I'm saying that the agreement. Take an example. I told that let's make an agreement to sell Taj Mahal in $10 million. It's everything is there. Promise is there. Consideration is there. You said legal enforceability is not there. What is not there to say that it is not legally enforceable?
Maybe ownership.
Ownership is there. I'm saying okay. You are saying the ownership of that. Okay, that is one thing.
Maybe the instrument of execution.
But sir, if we make an agreement, okay, valid instrument of execution because it's an agreement, but not a contract. But I'll give you a hint now. I'm sitting with Shine. He's sitting here very calmly. I want to make an agreement with him. I take a revolver out. Don't mind.
You want
I just keep it here. I just sign it.
witness, huh?
Not witness, sir. I just keep the revolver here. He don't want to sign. He's not compatible with the terms. And I say, man, sign it. Is it a valid contract? His acceptance is there. He's going to sign it.
Coercive,
Coercion. You cannot coerce the person. Next example. I say to Conrad sir that there is a beautiful piece of land and it's a garden. It's very good, this and that. The land is fertile. There is no rock inside. Okay. He believed me. He signed it. He gives his consent. He agrees. Tomorrow in court of law, if it is proved that it is not so, is the agreement void?
Misleading.
Exactly. Exactly. There are things. And this is what I did, what it is. It is a misrepresentation or it is something more. Have you ever heard of fraud? It's a fraud what I did.
Yeah, this representation is a tantamount to
Yes,
fraud.
it's lesser than a fraud. Misrepresentation can be by a mistake. It can be under any influence. But when the matter is, the difference is intention. A misrepresentation can be by innocence. Okay, I believe the third person, I said, sir, it is okay, you sign it. This is misrepresentation. I misrepresented, my intent was not there. But if I do this intentionally with the intention, it is a fraud. So the Contract Act, it does not say that what will determine the legality, but it says the other version. It says if the agreement is under influence of these things, it's not a valid contract. And those things are, as we just discussed.
So here one more, see in India, you execute any agreement in a non-judicial stamp paper, which is again issued by the statutory bodies. So when we come to this type of this country, I don't find any government fee or court fee, anything is paid because how do we treat this one?
That's a good question. Actually, sir, what it says is there is always different branches of law. Any civilian, if you want to give an affidavit, anything notarized, suppose you don't have your birth certificate, suppose. Now you want to submit the proof of birth. So you have to go to a legally authorized person, which is a lawyer or advocate, and he has to legally notarize it. When it goes to administration, there's a complete branch of administrative law that gives administrative authority a power that the document from him, when it is on the letterhead of that authority, it need not be notarized. It itself, because that communication is not individual, it's not personal. He is sitting on that position as an administrative officer, any government officer, any tertiary department of government. There's a huge list of that. So if he belongs to that authority, he uses that letterhead. That will itself bear the legality of that department of government.
So that means this both the companies, they are registered under Companies Act, they can enter. That means automatically it will be a legal document.
There is a small difference in that. Any company registered under Companies Law, Companies Act, is not authorized to use its letterhead as a notarized document. Again, it can be a private company, it can be a limited company. That authority or that exemption. Have you ever heard of sovereign immunity? Sovereign immunity is given to a person who belongs to the state, and that is at various places, even at the airports of the destination country, everywhere the huge list is there. That immunity is valid for the documentation also. Any government authority which issues an official documentation, it is considered that it is the documentation of not that person, but the post that person belongs to. So this is monitored that way. So I hope I replied to your question. Okay, great. So we just discussed. So typically have all essential of a valid contract, and it should have free consent. Now this free consent, there is a word consent and there is a word free consent. How the free consent is different from consent?
Remove the revolver.
Exactly, perfect. So for consent to be free consent, there must be an exclusion of 5 things. 5 things should not be there, and those 5 things are, as he very beautifully said. Okay, so we'll take that in the next slide because those points I want to take elaborately. First, we'll see for a valid contract. First thing is the free consent. Now, what else? Capacity to contract. Here, I'll discuss a very milestone case of Indian jurisdiction later in the next slide. But as of now, who's capable to contract? Any idea? Everybody is capable to contract. I can contract, you can contract, he can contract. Whether my son can contract.
He should be 18 years of age.
Exactly. So one important thing is minority. Minor cannot contract. What else? Who cannot contract? Mentally unfit. Perfect. Very good. Who else cannot contract? I'm drunk. I'm perfect. I'm major. I'm mentally fit, but I'm drunk. Or I'm intoxicated. I have taken some drug and I'm not in my conscious. Can I contract in that state? No. Okay. So these are the capacities to contract. Let's see how it talks about that. What are the limitations? Next is lawful consideration, lawful object. Same thing. Consideration was lawful, $10 million. It's lawful, I can pay. But the object was unlawful. I don't have any authority to sell Taj Mahal. So this is lawful. Here, these are those points. And the fifth one is, it should not be void. Ab initio. Void ab initio is the contract which since inception is void. Some contracts, maybe today we agree it's void, but in future, law changes or anything changes, it becomes void or void. But the contract which is void ab initio means void since starting is this. If you make any impossible event, like the earth will destroy, that day I will give you 10,000 rupees. There's a promise, there are two natural persons, there's a consideration. But whether the object or is it a valid agreement? No, because you are talking about something which is impossible. So this is that. So the next thing is, so you've seen what are the typically 5 elements should be present in a valid contract, which is it should be free, should have free consent, it should have capacity to contract, it should have lawful consideration, it should have lawful object, and it should not be a void based on the impossibility of events. Next category is void. So it's simple that whatever will be against any of these will be a void. Correct? So typically you can see it's very simple, which is mentioned in section 2G, that it is not enforceable by law, it's not binding, it's illegal in nature sometimes, the way we discussed, that was illegal. And if any contract to execute impossible event, it is void ab initio as per section 56 of Contracts Act. Okay, so these were the two. Now there's a question. You've seen there is something valid, something void. Is it all? There can be something which is in between. I just spoken in just 1 minute before. A contract which I signed is valid, but when I execute it, after some time, the rule of law, the law of that country, totally changes. Then what it will be? And I was not aware about any fact that it is going to change, and it changed. Then what that agreement will be called? Voidable. Now this voidable agreement, it is a beauty of this agreement that it is in a moribund state. Means the contract, any of the provision of contract is not legally enforceable. Parties knows about it, and still none of the parties are signing the contract because they want it to execute. So it is at one of, like, I being a contractor, I did something, I made something mentioned in the contract which is not as per the law, and my owner knows it. But he has no issues with that. He wants to proceed and close the contract. He don't want to challenge it in the court of law. It is in his benefit that I should finish it and complete it. Any provision may be unlawful. Means if any of the party take that agreement to court of law, it will be held void. But still we want to finish that. It is in midway, or there is some changes in the consequence, in the circumstances or the law, and we want to finish it. So that enforceable at option of one party, but not on the other. Means any one party is at fault, but the other party has no effect with that. And
once again, that remote and people can also interact.
yeah, I'll just give them a chance. So I hope others are also having the. I'll just stop after this slide for 5 minutes between us, so that you can ask questions if any, and then I'll start. So for the voidable, it's enforceable at the option of one party, but not on the other party. It's on his wish. Now that's why it is valid or void at present. That is one condition, that today it's valid, or it's valid today, but later it becomes void, or it's void today. We made it in the beginning that after 1 month or 2 months, when the law will change, we just have pre-agreed, it will become valid. So this becomes a voidable contract. Now another category is express. So we just discussed there are two things, express and implied. So this express and implied, you see the contract law, there is no type of contract like express or implied. It's only based on the promise, express promise and implied promise. Promise gives you the obligation, being a contractor. So it is express promise, implied promise mentioned in section 9 of Indian Contracts Act. And that governs the type of contract, which is express or implied. Please be mindful, it will not be a complete contract. It may be any terms also. You might have discussed sometime with the client that we will provide this, this, this. Now he says, this implies that you will provide this also. So it depends on your promise. It can be an individual term, which can be express or implied also. So this express contract is a written contract. Term and conditions clearly specified in the contract. And it comes from section 9, which is express promise. You write it clearly, you have to do it. This is express. Implied is, yes, this express can be oral or written, the reply to your question. It can be oral or written. Implied. Implied conditions to fulfill the contract. We just given the example that if it is not clearly mentioned, but it can be inferred, like you have to submit the drawing for the approval. It is implied that you will prepare the drawing or get the drawing. Otherwise, how will you submit it for approval? So this is implied. Either you will prepare or you will get the drawing from your sub-supplier and you will submit it. So this is the implied obligation.
What are the terms and conditions to interpret that whether it can be considered as implied or not? Because in contract we face all this kind of thing. Client will always try to
The answer to every legal solution, what I said, reasonableness. There's no fixed law. There's no fixed law. That is it. What I said is, I have to submit a drawing. Now, I will submit the drawing when I'll get it. I have to either make it or I have to get it from the supplier. So these two things imply. But my obligation is I have to submit the drawing. So from where I derive this? Reasonableness. Normal. You can list down activities to any level in the contract. But when you sign a contract of big amounts, you need not to mention that the document should be A4 size, the printing should be black in color. It is implied that if you mention that it has to follow XYZ standards, all those standards will apply to the deliverable. So without, there's no contract in the world which can have everything in express until it's a very small thing. Even if you make a contract to purchase a cold drink also, you have to take some implications. You cannot mention the color should be black, the size should be this, the bottle should be transparent, the logo should have this color. At one place, you have to stop and allow the other party to see the implied things and do it. So this is the difference.
But that part I understood. Now there is something like when you talk about big contracts, that implied, the implication of that implied can run into millions. Like the client is telling it is implied, I'm telling it is not implied.
Yeah.
So how do you mitigate this? Like where we can go to the court of law to resolve this implied thing?
Very good. It is relevant. It is the impact. You might have seen these things. Okay, they say no, this color is not good. Can you just paint it? You see what is the implication? If it is 100 yards, 150 yards, considering your project cost, and sometimes it is not implied as per the contract. Say galvanization, he say painted red with a normal paint. Now, in this case, it is expressly mentioned. He says that it should protect it from corrosion. You consider, you assume that it has to be galvanization, but they say I need a proper painted, the first layer of the primer and this and that. You see the cost implication. It is reasonable. If it is reasonable, you have the right to say I will do it. Or still, if you believe that your offer clearly specifies it as not to be done, it is expressed that you will not do this way, you can say no. So it depends on the what is implied in a reasonable sense. He cannot just imply everything from the contract, right? So it is implied in a reasonable sense, and at the same time, if you want to agree that, you have to see that what it is costing you for the reasonableness. The first thing I said as per the law, the second thing I said as per the contract, because you have to make your customer happy also. Okay, bilateral versus unilateral.
Then reasonability may depend on person to person.
But there is always a reasonability as per law. It always says in the law that your perspective, my perspective. But what court sees is right perspective. Any one of us can be right. Both of us can be wrong, and there may be something in between which is right.
Like for suppose for me 100 riyal may be reasonable, but for someone else 50 riyal may not be reasonable.
That depends on what value of contract you are signing. For 200 real contract, 100 real is a significant amount. But for 5,000 million, it's nothing. So it depends on what type of contract you are signing. Okay. So bilateral versus unilateral. Bi says 2 and uni is 1. So bilateral, there are bilateral promises. You give me this service, I'll give you this one. This is bilateral. Unilateral, an agreement in inheritance, an agreement of the maintenance of a Suppose a person, he got divorced, he got the maintenance of the kid. It's a unilateral obligation. He's not going to get something written from his kid. So this is the example of unilateral obligations. Another type. Now there are two types which are very important in day-to-day activities. But in contracts, in typical construction contract, you'll find them very less, but they are also type of contract. Contingent contract, which is mentioned in section 31 and 36 of the Act. Now, contingent contract is what? Contingent. What do you understand with the contingent? Any idea?
Contingent means something which you have a cushion or extra, which you call as contingent.
Which is not fixed, which is dependent on something, which can come or come, may not come.
Yes.
Which is not planned, which is not envisaged, maybe envisaged but not planned.
Yes.
Not decided to do. It came forward, it was done, and the contract established. Such contracts, when there is no intention, no will to do it, but it happens and it becomes an agreement. Example. Here some examples are very interesting. But before that, we see contract to do or abstain from doing something. Again, contract can be for legal act as well as legal omission also. I will not do this. Give me this money. Okay, fine. Until it's not with fraud or coercion or something. So contract to do or abstain from doing something if some event collateral or secondary to such contract does or does not happen. It's not necessarily that the event should happen. If it does not happen also, you can make a contract. I'll take the examples now, you will come to understand. So contract for doing or not doing something based on any event happening or not. Both are covered here. So let's see some example here. But okay. A contracts to pay B rupees 10,000 if B's house is burned. This is a contingent contract. Although the objective here is, it's not unlawful. Huh? It's he's predicting on some event, but that event is not desirable. But is it impossible? It is possible. The house can burn.
Like insurance.
Insurance is something else. It comes into surety, but yes, a touch of there. So A contracts to pay, but here it is a contingent contract or not? Can you see all the parameters are there? Am I right or wrong? It is a contingent contract because there is a condition. Contingent means subject to condition. If you see the first line, doing or something if something happens or not. Now this is different, that something is impossible or it's not going to happen. That is different, but this is a contingent contract. Now, section 32 says contingent on uncertain future event. Till now you talked about the condition, but what about the condition is uncertain? It's not impossible, but it's uncertain. You're not sure whether this will happen or not. But any contract made on that event, what about it? It will be unenforceable by the law until that event happens because it is uncertain. Right? So if you made an agreement on an uncertain event, until that uncertain event happens, your agreement is not enforceable by law. But as soon as that uncertain event happens, the contract becomes void. So sorry, if it is not happening, it becomes impossible, it becomes void. And as soon as that event happens, that uncertain event happens, it becomes valid. So this is about the contingent contract. Let's take some examples. A makes a contract with B to buy B's house if A survives C. So if C dies before A will make a A will get a B's horse. So this is a contract. Does it have a condition? There is a condition that if A survives C, C dies before A. Okay. Now is it an uncertain event? Yes, you never know. And you will die. It's not impossible, but it is uncertain. Correct? So now when he will die is an uncertain event. So what about this contract? When it will be void? As of now, it's not legally enforceable because C is surviving. But the contract cannot be enforceable by law unless and until C dies in his lifetime. Clear? When it will become valid? When A will survive, when C will die, then it will become valid. Okay, so that uncertain event, when it becomes certain, the contract becomes legally enforceable. Second example, A contracts to pay B a sum of money when B marries C. Okay, you get married to C, I'll give you a sum of money. What happened? C dies without getting married to B. Is it uncertain or impossible? Uncertain, how come?
Possible.
Is it any way possible that C dies and now after death he will get married to B? So it's not
Without being married.
No. A contract to B a sum of money when B marries C. Okay, you get married to C, I'll give you money. Now C dies without getting married to B. It's not possible now. C dies before marriage. The contract will become void because it's not possible. So this is how uncertainty is being dealt in these cases. Now, agreement contingent on impossible event. It's void ab initio, as we discussed in the void agreement. Anything impossible, it will not happen. So that agreement day itself is void. You cannot make any agreement on any impossible event. The crux of the matter is that. A agrees to pay ₹1,000 to B if two straight line will enclose a space. People to whom the design. Especially this is void, voidable or valid or contingent. It is contingent in basis, but since initio it's void, you can't make it. Two straight line will never meet. A agrees to pay B ₹1,000 if B will marry A's daughter. Okay. That at the time of the agreement. Contingent or void? Void. Very good. Perfect. So this is the difference between contingent and.
Can be fraud also.
No, if he is not aware, then it's a misrepresentation. Then it goes to voidable because as of now, the latest law, what we discussed, two conditions: the voidable, the undue influence that we'll see. There are two conditions under which the contract will be voidable, not void. That we'll see in the
Not
next slide.
only C was dead and the C consent is not also there. Na?
Yeah. Actually, sir, that will go to the essentials of the contract, but in itself, the agreement itself is void. That's true. But unless it is specified, we can assume that also. But it is not written that court sees that way only. It is not mentioned also that she is not agreeing. So it will be the next stage of investigation. Based on these facts, this is void.
But there should be a relation between, some ownership of C to A, right?
It's just something like that. That okay, if it was a condition, when it is said that it's a contingency, it is assumed in this example that this contingency is valid. Only the situation is being challenged. Okay, quasi contract. This is something interesting. There's no initial intention between making a contract, which I was saying. Two parties are agreeing to a contract all of a sudden by chance, and the contract is valid. Acceptance not there. Neither I offered, neither you accepted, but the agreement is there. What could be those situations when there is no offer in agreement and when there is no offer in acceptance, but there is an agreement? Yes, I'll come to that. Consent is there, maybe implied. So this is a strange sort of contract, but you will see that in day-to-day life. I'll give you the example. There's no offer, there's no acceptance, there's an agreement, and there's a consent.
Some marriages like that.
No, sir, but in marriage also there is offer and acceptance. Quasi contract. Quasi means between two states. It's not complete, but it is a contract. Examples.
Because here it is semi. Huh?
Semi. But the legality is same as a contract. So natural justice. The principle here is when there is no offer and acceptance and consent is there, agreement is there, the concept of all those common law principles. Natural justice, morality, equity, and good conscience. These are four common law principles. Everywhere in contracts and legal, you have to see this. Whatever cannot be resolved with the statute, the code goes with these four. In all jurisdictions, UK, US, here. Not here, sorry, in India. So this is there. Examples. I'm giving you an example for this. Your doorbell rang, and there is a pizza person in front of your door. Give me the response.
See, it defines this natural justice.
Sir, after example, I will take all these four one by one, and you will say it is present. So if you can just reply to my example. Your doorbell rang, and there is a Pizza Hut person in front of you. He delivers you the pizza. He didn't ask you your name. He delivers you the pizza, and he goes. You have not ordered that pizza. You waited for half an hour. You waited for 1 hour. You waited for 3 hours. He didn't come. Pizza will go spoiled by the evening. And you are not supposed to pay anything as of now. You just did. You don't have his contact number. Your intentions are very clear. You are moral. But that pizza is in front of you and it will go waste. What you will do? Questions, replies please. You will eat. You? Reasonability. What you will do?
I can always call the pizza Hut shop.
But you don't have his number. You don't have Pizza Hut number also. You don't have cell at home. Tell me.
After 3 hours, just enjoy.
Just enjoy. Now again the doorbell ring after 3 hours. And the Pizza Hut person is in front of you. He says you, sir, it's by mistake. So can you pay me for that? Because I need to deliver it. So what you have to do?
Basis of morality, you have to pay.
Okay. So is it a contract?
No, it's not.
It's not an agreement. You are paying him.
Not at all.
It's a contract. It's an agreement. But what is missing here? He didn't offer to you as a person. You didn't accept it as a person. You gave him the consideration. You took the service. It is an agreement. But without these two things, your consent was there. You didn't call him for consent. But when you consumed it, it is an implied consent that you want to eat it. So based on these principles, will you pay him? Yes. This is possible. Another examples. A tradesman leaves goods at B's house by mistake, which I just discussed. B treats the goods at his own. It's not pizza, it's the goods. He started using those clothes. And after 2 days, he came back. And he wanted it back or the money because it's a mistake by him. He is bound to pay for them if it is consumed. As per the law. You cannot say you did it a mistake and I'm using it. When you use it, your implied consent is given. A saves B's property from fire. Now there is another twist in this because there are 5 sections. If there is a minor and there is a major, and minor is orphan, suppose, and he has a property. So now if that major, he takes care of that person as a minor. And tomorrow, if he needs something, the major, he can go to court of law and he has asked for the money. He has asked for the benefit. He has asked for the favor. He has that right. That is also coming from the quasi-contract consent. So that is his right when he gives if any act which is not due to gratuitousness, not gratuitous act. If the act is with expectation of a benefit and there is a natural benefit to a person because of another person, the person who's getting benefited, it says it's duty to pay to the person who's giving the service if he demands. If he does not demand, enjoy. But if he, like the pizza person, if he comes and he says, sir, this is so. So based on all the sequence of events, he deserves to be paid. So that it says. So this example is about that. A saves B's property from fire. A is not entitled to compensation from B if the circumstances show that the intention of saving was gratuitous. He did not go on to a business relationship. He did not came and he did not go on with this expectation. He just gone and saved. You saved a person from the road, from a road accident. It's a gratuitous act. You did not agree. You did not expect it. You are not a professional person saver on the road. If you are, it is a duty. So it's called something like moral duty, not your legal duty. If you did something for moral duty, you cannot go and ask for the benefit. It's a legal duty or somewhere related, or law can interpret that as an implied obligation from your end to the benefiter. He has a duty to pay you for that. This is the quasi-contract consent. So now, so these are all types of contracts. Now we go fast with the essential of a valid contract. The one which we are discussing. We discuss about free consent, capacity to contract, unlawful, lawful object, lawful consideration, and it should not be void. These 5 things we discussed. Now, when I say free consent, which we were discussing, the example what I gave you, so that how it comes. So it says the competency to contract, which is mentioned in section 11 of the Act. It says the person should not be a minor, he should be major. And in India, as per the Minority Act, the age which makes a person capable to contract is 18 years. Apart from some religious literature or act which says that the age of majority is different in particular religious things. But as per Indian Contracts Act, when it comes to contracting, it is 18 years. The person should be of sound mind, we discussed. And the third thing we discussed was the party or person should not be disqualified from contracting as per the law. I am major, I am not intoxicated, I am of sound mind, but I am in prison. And court had held a benefit on a ban on me that I cannot go for a business relationship. Can I do the contract? I am sound mind, I am major. He should be legally allowed. He should be legally eligible to make a contract. So these are the 3 things as per section 11 who is competent to contract. A person should be major, he should be of sound mind, and he should not be disqualified as per the law from contracting. Now these 3, is it sufficient to state that these 3 has satisfied? There is always some glitches that we'll discuss now in a quick manner. Now there's a case. I'll give you the facts of the case. I want to listen from you that what you feel, and then we'll see what was the decision. So the case, famous case in Indian jurisdiction, this is one of the milestone cases. Okay, Dharmod, and if anybody knows the outcomes, please don't say. Okay, so the case is Dharmodas Ghosh versus Mohri Bibi, 1893, before the freedom of India. The facts of the case are: there was a kid. His name was Dharmodas Ghosh. He goes to a landlord, Bhumro, that was his name. He asked them to give him 20,000 rupees that time. And he says that this is my land papers, keep it, and it is yours. The person was minor. This Dharmodas Ghosh was minor. So the landlord, the Bhumro, what he did, he took that, he gave him the money, he took the papers, and he says, okay, now I'm the owner. The mother of that boy, the minor boy, he came to know about it. He goes later to the owner, the Bhumro. He says that he's a minor, this is not valid, you're taking the papers, it's not valid. So he didn't ask them to return the money. He said, no, I'm the owner of the property, because in 20,000 he was giving such a big land, such a big property. So he took that, but is he legally allowed to hold that property? No. So what happened? This case come into picture in 1893, where Dharmodas made a case on Mohri Bibi. She was the legal heir of Bhumro. He asked, I need the possession of my land back. So what would be the decision of the court?
Might have restored.
Handed over again. So
Might have restored.
Yes. Give it back. It is void ab initio because it's with the minor. No need to going in the details and facts of the case. It is void ab initio because the deal is with the minor. It's not a valid contract. Decision in favor of minor in 1895. Possession to be returned. Now, this is not all. After some years, 1903, the legal heir, Mohri Bibi, she again filed a case to that boy and his mother. And here what she said, okay, you took the land, but my father gave you 20,000 rupees. Give it back. Then what could have been the decision of the case? Surprisingly.
Again,
dealing with some minor, you're not eligible to take your money back.
Exactly. Because your contract did not existed. It can be anything, it can be charity, anything, but it was not a contract.
Now is a gift.
Consider as a
You
gift.
gifted.
So the decision was again against her. Decision upheld and no return for money paid to minor because it was void ab initio. Okay. Now the next thing is sound mind.
But it's not morality, right?
No, why? You see what? I'll come to that. I'll come to that.
When the question of minor comes
Minor
into
is
that,
the-
morality
But
is not there.
if you're talking about moral, if he accepted to return the possession of the land from the beginning, then it's okay. There is a moral from the beginning.
And what do you believe that that person, when a kid came to him in front of him, why he made the contract? What he was seeing in that? The child is not mentally okay. And when he's seen the amount and the portion of the land, there must be considerable difference. That was immoral. That was not as per the equity. That was not as per the natural justice. Okay, so sound mind, capable of understanding and making a judgment. It's very clear. Okay, now I'll give you two situations. You tell me whether it's a valid contract or not. I am a person, I drink, and I signed an agreement. Is it valid?
No.
What is missing? I'm a sound mind person. I'm a person of sound mind. I'm not lunatic or
Consciousness.
when. I'm conscious. At that time, not.
So that
Yes.
again.
And at the time of signing contract.
Signing of the contract.
At the time of signing the contract, if I'm not in my conscious, if I'm intoxicated on drugs, the contract is void.
How you will prove
how
after
do you
2 days,
prove
3 days
after
or 1 year?
That goes to court. It is proven. You might have seen the criminal series and all that you know. I'm talking about the law. In fact, that depends on the case. It will be easily discovered. Witnesses, lot many things, lot many tests. Court knows that is a forensic analysis. Second thing, then if this is your reply, there is a person who's of unsound mind. He got fits. Then how come in medical science any declaration is being signed by that guy that I'm releasing the doctor from any obligations if anything goes wrong with my surgery or treatment and something like that. He signs that, but he's not always okay. Then what is the legality of that declaration? Is it void? What is there? Amit, you have just told in the previous example.
Consciousness.
When? So, if it is proved in the court of law that the person is also lunatic or madman or whatever, but at the time of signing this declaration, he was in his conscious, it's a valid agreement. So, it's not only the state of mind, it's state at the time of making the contract. And the same is in the criminology, as per Indian Penal Code. Same is there. At that state, when you committed a contract, when you made a contract, what is your mental state? So, not the person should be capable of understanding and making a judgment. That is a basic idea. What he's doing, he should know about it, and not intoxicated or under the influence of any drugs. Mental capacity at the time of signing the agreement is important. So there are two stipulations from this which we just discussed: sound, but occasionally unsound at the time of contracting, incompetent to contract. Contract is void. Otherwise, unsound, but occasionally sound, and at the time of contracting is competent to contract. Okay, the third thing is the person should not be disqualified from the contracting aspect. Okay, that we have already discussed. The important one, the free consent, which we discussed, which is mentioned in section 14. So what is free consent? From what it should be free to make it free consent? There are 5 things which are mentioned in subsequent subsections. A coercion, section 15. You cannot use coercion to sign to a party to sign the agreement. Coercion is what? Committing or threatening to commit. It's not committing. If you threaten to commit also, any criminal act which is forbidden as per section 45 of IPC, the old section, because now it is changed. So anything, it can be a threat, it can be an extortion, it can be kidnapping, threat to kidnap, threat to murder, threat to theft, anything compared to that which is considered a criminal act to make the person enter into an agreement is coercion. And anything under the influence of coercion, any agreement will be void. Unlawful detaining or threatening to detain any property. I just give an example. To the prejudice of a person for entering into the agreement. Second thing, it should be free from undue influence. Any example of undue influence anybody can give? What is undue influence? And why the contract is not valid if there is undue influence in free consent? In the consent and the consent is not free.
Usually,
Undue influence.
no. Undue influence means calling him and cajole or something temporarily is out of mind and.
You are saying distracting him.
No. See, you approach a person in such a way that you put him and.
What you're using?
Yeah.
What you're using?
Maybe some.
How?
Some
How?
gift.
You give an example.
Unsolicited gift or something that will make, and that might.
That will go to fraud, sir.
Hmm?
Unsolicited gift goes to fraud. The what here is influence. You give an example. Suppose an actress calls a person. Suppose Prime Minister of India calls a person.
Yeah, that's
So,
what I meant to
What? It's not just a call. What is behind that?
say.
The power of that person. So if any party uses that power, fraud is different, gifting is different. It is only merely influence of power. Use of power, position of authority to influence a party and to gain unfair advantage for entering into agreement. Anything with this will not be a free consent, and that consent as per the law will be void. Third thing is fraud. We just discussed the difference between fraud and misrepresentation. Fraud is where your intention comes. The misrepresentation added with the intention is fraud. Simple. So fraud means you have an intention to deceive a person. You conceal the fact. Conceal the fact with the intent to deceive. But when you conceal the fact with innocence, it goes to misrepresentation.
Our Abhijit will conceal the experience certificate, then we will terminate.
Exactly. So that is fraud.
That will
So,
discuss later on.
so that is good. That is a good example actually. If he conceals the fact, he is a fraud, and on basis of fraud, he can say your employment agreement is not valid. That is a good example. Okay. Promise with the intent to deceive. What else? It could be fraudulent act of omission. Doing is act, not doing is omission. Misrepresentation, the lesser than this, but misrepresentation will also lead to a invalid contract. So misrepresentation mentioned in section 18 says that it is a positive assertion. Here intention is missing. Had it been intention here, it would have been a fraud. So it's a positive assertion. When the person is making assertion, he is not sure. He just want to make a deal, sign the contract. He just says, okay, it will happen. He will give some round replies. He will try to confuse the person. But not with the intent to deceive. Breach of duty. Innocently, he causing innocently a contracting party to make a mistake. That is the misrepresentation. And when it is with the intent, then it's a fraud. The fifth thing is mistake. Now in law, in universal law, there is a maxim, Latin maxim, which says ignorantia legis excusat, but ignorantia fact excusat, but ignorantia legis neminem excusat, which means ignorance of fact is excuse, but ignorance of law is not. You can say that I was not aware about this fact. It's okay. But if you say I was not aware about this law, it's not okay. You are going to the road. You hit you did not follow the traffic signals. You hit somebody, he died. Can you say I was not aware about the traffic signals? No, because it's a law. It is important. It's mandatory that you should know the law. But if you are not aware about the fact that the person is coming from backside and he will overtake you, he did not follow the signal or something. So you are not aware of the fact and you did this, you will be exempted. So that is why it says with this maxim that ignorance of fact is an excuse, but ignorance of law is not. Same way, if any agreement is with a mistake, both parties under mistake as to matter of fact, it will become void. Definitely, because they were not. It is admissible that they were not about the fact, so it's a void. Examples. Now your turn to reply. A agrees to buy from B a certain horse. It turns out that the horse was dead at the time of bargain. So it's what? Mistake of fact or mistake of law? Very good. So, neither party was aware of the fact. No party was aware of the fact. This was an important condition to determine that it's a mistake of fact. The agreement is void. Now, these were two. Now we have seen the capacity to contract. We have seen the free consent, which is important. Now the third thing is, as we discussed, lawful consideration, and the fourth thing is lawful object. So there is a set of rules in section 23 of this act, which says common for all that consideration or object, whatever you get and whatever you do, both are lawful, subject to certain conditions. There are 5 conditions. So those 5 conditions jointly are in section 23, a consideration or object is lawful unless means the one which I'm going to say, if those are found in the agreement will be void based on the unlawfulness of consideration or object. These are forbidden by law. Anything forbidden by law, if you make an agreement, it is void. Any consideration or object which is of such nature that it is not illegal, but if you allow that, the ultimate result of the contract will be illegal. So it is of such nature that if it is permitted, it will defeat the provisions of law. Any object or consideration this way is also void. Now, for fraudulent practice, anything fraudulent, any consideration which is fraudulent, any object which is fraudulent, the agreement is void. Injury to a person or property of others, any agreement, it is void. Immoral or against public policy as regarded by the court. I hope these are all explanatory, simple things. You can understand. If you have any doubt with this, let me know. Anybody connected online? Any clarification?
Let the participants whether they are having any questions.
Anybody connected? Okay, I believe that everything is okay. So I'm moving forward. Examples on this. Lawful consideration, lawful objective. A promises to obtain from B an employment in the public services and B promises to pay 1,000 rupees to A. Is it okay? What is there? 3 or 4? Consideration is unlawful. Paying money is unlawful. Object getting the job based on your qualification also. So object is not unlawful. The consideration is unlawful. Another.
Here the consideration is constituted as a bribe.
Exactly. So it is unlawful. A promises B to drop a prosecution, which he has instituted against B for robbery, and B promises to restore the value of the things taken. You will discharge, you withdraw your prosecution, and whatever losses I have taken, I'll give you back. Is it lawful? Why? He's paying him whatever he is done.
The robbery is not allowed.
Perfect. Object is unlawful. Okay, great. So I'm happy that things are clear to you. Not expressly declared void. Any agreement which is not expressly declared void is valid. So with this, we are over with this section. Now the last one in the contract law, then we'll go to the federal form of contract in a fast manner, is a breach of contract. Breach of contract is important for us to know, because in day-to-day say we are seeing clients saying it's a breach of contract, it's breach of your obligations. I'll put LDs or you have to compensate this all. So what is the legal basis of this? From where it came and what law says? Because we make the contract based on the law. We take implied, as I said. Now, when you know the legal terms, it will be easier for you to understand the contract. So we will see what is implied in this law, which they took in the contract, because our language of contract and this legal language is totally different. We never find the word promise in our contract. So you can see how they took it, how they interpreted it, and what legality it brings. Is it illegal or voidable? That we have to see. So breach of contract, section 73 to 75. Section 73 speaks about the compensation. Compensation, the right to compensate a party which is having incurred any losses because of the breach of contract from the other party. Any loss damage due to the breach of contract from other party to suffering party, the party who has suffered, from the party who's breaking the promise. So the party who's breaking the promise, he has made the party suffer, and the party, suffering party, suffered with the loss or damage, and that's why he's eligible for the compensation as per section 73. But here excluded remote or indirect loss or damages. You did so, this product is getting delayed, and I have 10,000 times loss. Why this consequential loss? It doesn't speak about it. It says no. Whatever is limited, and that limitation we will see in federal form of contract and our contract, what it is and under what circumstances it is.
So we can say this is a demonstrative loser, that is who breach and pay the penalty also.
Yeah. Example, not from the construction contract, that we'll see in the next section. Just to make you general understanding, general examples. A contracts to repair B's house in a certain manner. In a certain manner, remember, technical specifications, design people. Certain manner is the technical specifications, and receives payment in advance. Okay, he received the payment, he promises. A repairs the house, but not according to the contract. What will happen? B is entitled to recover from A the cost of making the repairs conform to the contract. Not anything. Not 5, 10, nothing. This was agreed, this was done. This is the difference. Pay me this. This is the compensation. Typically. Now compensation. Let's take an example, then we'll go through the next one. A contracts to supply B with a certain quantity of iron at a fixed price. This one is a bit tricky. Being a higher price than that for which A could procure and deliver the iron. A could have procured something in 10 riyals. He could have asked 15 riyals, but he made an agreement with B for this 10 riyals, he asked for 200 riyals. Okay, so he quoted and agreed. Please be mindful. He agreed, both parties agreed that we will have it for 200 riyals. Now, B wrongfully refuses to receive the iron. Wrongfully. Here, it could be B refuses, but B could have refused based on citing that I am not going to proceed with this contract. So he did not do so. He wrongfully refused. He did not provide a proper termination notice or something what was agreed in the contract. So he wrongfully refuses it. So the fault is with B. So now what will happen? B must pay to A by way of compensation. But what it could be, 200 or 15? The agreed one or the reasonable one? It has gone to court of law.
How much have
There
A
is no
suffered?
but the other,
How much
second one.
A was supposed to get that iron in 10 reals. He could have asked for 12, 15, 20. He made an agreement with 200, but B, might be he was aware or not, he wrongfully denies with that contract. After signing, he said, I don't want to go ahead with this purchase.
The compensation is a fixed price.
No, here there is a difference. It depends. If the compensation, actually you asked, you said what I was going to touch in the next slide, but that's good. Fix is a penalty. Fix is the penalty, which is mentioned. LD. LD is compensation or penalty.
LD
It's liquidated. You fixed it. For approving the LD, for taking the LD, do I need to show the party, the suffering, that this is my loss?
No, LD is a penalty only, not compensation.
That was next. So here is the compensation. The code, when it goes to court of law, please be mindful it's court of law. They will follow the reasonableness. 10 real was making, 15 real could have been the price, and agreement was made on 200. Now the breaching party has to pay the compensation to the party who has committed a loss as a compensation. So that compensation will be seen as 200 or 15. 15, because the reasonability comes in the picture.
Here the compensation, we can say it is a non-liquidated.
Exactly, because it is not liquidated is something which is estimated and kept fixed as per the law or as per the agreement. Unliquidated compensation. When we go to the law of tort, you might have some idea. When we go to law of tort, that is completely based on compensation. Unliquidated, no law.
Yeah, mostly LB, liquidated damages will have a ceiling, maybe 20%, 30%.
Exactly,
40%.
exactly. That is a penalty that will be dealt in section 74, which we'll see now.
But non-liquidated, you cannot in the initial stage while selling, you cannot determine the ceiling.
Perfect, perfect. Whatever is envisaged, whatever is calculated, it is written. That becomes liquidated. Or in legal terms, codified. What is codified? Liquidated. When you liquidate something, you envisage it, you write it in the papers. It becomes act, it becomes law. Uncodified, not known. Purely based on the nature of the work. Purely nature on the nature of the remedy. And complete law of tort is based on that. Now breach of contract, the other section 74, which we have just discussed in advance. All thanks to sir. The compensation for breach of the contract. Same thing, but liquidated. No need to prove actual damage. If my contract says I have to, if you delay by this date, I will be eligible to divide the LD 10%, I will do so. I need not produce you the evidence that it is 5% or 15%, or I cannot on that ground go for it that 20% is the loss I incurred. So now it is not 10, it is 20. No, it's fixed. It's a penalty.
I can put it in this way. See, now suppose if we delay this work, they can put a penalty at the predetermined.
Predetermined.
Okay.
Fixed.
Okay. Suppose if it is that clause is not there, they are eligible to get the generation loss or something that will become the compensation, which is beyond your comprehension.
That will be dependent on the court of law, because when there is no clause and the party want to recover for the delay, where he will go? Law. He will go to the court. Now court will not see 10 or 5. Court will see law. Bring your actual one. What was agreed? Nothing was agreed. Now court will go on reasonability. So for that delay, it is favoring the contractor also. If it will not freeze or limit it to 10%, he may tomorrow when the court of law has to give 50% or maybe 100%. You never know the impact. So it is supporting the contractor. Liquidated delay clause support the contractor. What is codified, what is liquidated, written explicitly in the contract, that supports the contractor because he agreed to it. He envisaged that that could be my risk and responsibility. So here it is fixed. Example, A contracts with B that if A practices as a surgeon within Calcutta, he will pay B rupees 500. Okay. A practices as a surgeon in Calcutta. It happened. He said something. Then what will happen? B is entitled to such compensation, not exceeding rupees 500 as the court considers reasonable. So here is the ceiling. Signing the contract, terminating the contract. Now termination, we'll see that in details. Now you see from where the LD is coming, section 74. From where compensation and law of tort coming, section 73. from where the termination is coming, 75. So this is the law behind it. Rescinding the contract says that the party rescinding entitled to compensation only if you terminate. You are still eligible for the compensation only when it is because of the breach by the other party. If you sustained any damage due to non-fulfillment of the promise by the other party, you are eligible. At one side, you are terminating. At the same time, you are eligible to claim the losses or damages. Example, A is a singer. Now, this is a tricky one. A is a singer who contracts with B, the manager of a theater. So there's a singer, there's a manager of a theater. They made a contract that A will sing at his theater for 2 nights in every week during the next 2 months. And B engages to pay her 100 rupees for each night's performance in the club. On the 6th night, A willfully, the word is willfully, it's knowingly.
I'm just trying.
Sure. A willfully absents herself from the theater. And E, in consequence, resigns the contract. Now, what will be the consequences of this termination or rescission? How it is related with the LDs? B is entitled to claim compensation for what? The damage which he has sustained through the non-fulfillment of contract, because here there is nothing fixed. Okay, so it will go to the section 73. Had it been agreed that this much rupees or reals will be given as a penalty, it would have addressed